Hello and welcome to round one with Bushwhacker Zoo. This is a pretty clear mulligan, I think. One of the unfortunate aspects of this deck, and specifically adding a bunch of target's commands and other 2-drops, is that you can end up with these one-landers that don't go anywhere. With a Scry, so we're on the play, yeah, just ship it. This is probably worse. This, however, is fine. Well, it doesn't matter. And this is going to get a stomping ground. We're going to lead on Wild Nicodle. I think that there's a point where, Vexing Devil is most likely that spot going to deal 4 damage and then die. The Punisher trigger is just going to immediately happen. But, Nicodle might, it's probably going to get in 2 attacks and deal at least that 4 damage. So, Hollowed Fountain. I do think there's a point where, it's probably not yet though. I'm trying to measure the point where Vexing Devil entering the battlefield will deal 0 damage as opposed to 4. And at that point, whatever the point is before that where you can cast it instead of Wild Nicodle is the point where you should make that decision. But in every other spot, you should cast your other 2-drop first. So, for example, here, I think that I have at least one more turn to cast Vexing Devil before it gets negated. This does not bode well for me. Being light on cards against blue-white control is probably a bad spot. So, I think the right play here is the Vexing Devil. The other option is bolting the Wall of Omens, but I'm not sure how many more attacks I'm actually going to get. At this point, I need multiple Wild Nicodle attacks to make that pan out. So, I'd spend the bolt there. Oh, that's not good. That's really bad. That probably implies a Kitchen Finks. Interesting. Click. Probably want a Foundry, just a second red. I don't really care about the damage. I don't think I want to extend my creatures, though. So Vexing Devil got in 3 damage there effectively. I'm probably getting Supreme Verdicted here. No need to deploy Bolt EOT because whatever. It's going to be castable by the time the game ends anyways. That's a pretty good draw. I think that I'll be able to get to the second green if I need it later on. Okay. This panned out reasonably well. There's probably a Resto Angel waiting now. I don't think there's anything I can do besides jam. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Removal plus Resto is definitely problematic. Oh, wow, that's even worse. My opponent going up to 10 life is quite a problem. We have managed to be pretty solid for a 5 card hand, but I think that has a lot to do with our opponent's early game being pretty light. Ojitai. That's fine. I don't have good attacks. Probably dead here. I can't really imagine surviving the Ojitai hit at this point. So sideboarding, going to take out... Don't really... Taking out Path's kind of weird because my opponent likely has Finks. Definitely still want Rampagers because that breaks through wall pretty reasonably. Probably still want Bolts. I don't want Cage. I do want Thalia. I don't think I want Revelry or anything like that, or Helix. So I think realistically the only thing I want to do is cut Path and probably a Mutagenic for 2 Thalias. Well, I'll make the plays that I can make here. Yeah, that's fine. There's no way for me to kill by that point. Though Chai just kills me in 2 hits. I don't think Lightning Helix does what I want it to. So let's get these in there. And actually, this is kind of interesting. I don't know what of these I want to take out. It's possible I still want Path in some amount. I'm willing to sit on like one of those in case of like Core Firewalker or Kitchen Finks and just cut these because they're pretty bad. Yeah, this is a fine start. I don't think there's anything else on the board here. I just have to get a good aggressive draw. Get a really good one. Game 3 is really what I need. The good news is that our opponent's 2-color deck is likely to be short or just non-existent on Engineered Explosives, which is one of the better cards against this deck. You can just set it on one and then just leave it up early for the rest of the game, and it makes playing the game really difficult for this deck at times. Yeah, this is pretty great. We get to attack for 10 on turn 2? 9. This doesn't get the last trigger. don't think there's a reason to. I should just play the Temple Guard, I think. Save the fetches. Because there's nothing double red I could possibly want on the second turn. The other alternative is Heath to Stomping Ground. I can make that decision later. I'm trying to think if there's also a way to. If I draw like a Curt Ape or something, it's probably better to go Experiment, Burning Tree, double 1-drop, and then Bushwhacker. Either way, now, I don't think. Let's see, that outputs. If I went double 1-drop with like a Curt Ape, that would be 3, and then 4, 10, 3, and 3. Yeah, that's just a million. That's 16. Though, I guess that leaves me with nothing to surge the Bushwhacker. So I guess the actual correct play there is then. That's kind of awkward. So I was thinking. I guess so that that's fine. So my thought process is basically the way that Experiment 1 lines up against Supreme Verdict is really nice because of the regenerate ability. Like that was a built-in feature of the card when it was printed in Gate Crash. I was trying to figure out how I could get to 2 counters on it. But the thing is that I'm doing all this math for like turn 3 on the play, and by turn 3 on the play, it just doesn't matter. They have to, my opponent actually has to get to a turn 4 or they die. Um, like that's like all this math for how to get the second counter on these Experiment ones on turn 3 just doesn't matter here. On the draw, it would, just so you can have things that can survive through the verdict. So I think that the end. Guess it might be right to go experiment, emissary Bushwhacker. That's 1, and then that's significantly less damage. That's an attack for 1 on turn 2, and then 12 on turn 3. Whereas the other way around is an attack for 9 and then 6. And then the other Experiment one's like whatever. I think that the difference of 2 damage. So it's 15 over 2 turns. Though I guess. So the turn 2 dump my hand and attack is 15 over 2 attacks, and then I have a 1/1 Experiment 1 on top of the 2/2, and then the Experiment 1 into Experiment 1 into dump my hand is 13 damage over by turn 3, but I have an extra counter on the Experiment 1, which I don't think is worth the bonus damage. The only thing that could be worth the extra damage is that if you have to add in the odds of me having drawn an additional 1-drop on the 3rd turn, which there are 18, so 17. So there's like a third, like 1 out of 3 chance of dealing an extra 3 or 4 damage. I guess if it's another Experiment 1, it's only 2. So we'll say like an extra 3 damage on average. So it's like an extra 1 damage there. So the question is the extra counter on that Experiment 1 worth of damage? I don't think it necessarily is. So here we go. Not going to fetch on turn 1 for marginal thinning. I'd rather just actually play my lands and potentially minimize damage if something weird happens with like Vendilion Click cracking back later. Boo. So now that that's happened, it looks like my opponent's trying to leave up Spell Snare. So I think that I actually want to play around that and go experiment into Goblin Guide. We're just going to fetch basic here. Good to know. So path. Okay, that's kind of convenient. I guess that's a reason for leaving basics in my deck, is that if there's another path, but I think with 4 mana I should be able to do whatever I want. This is probably wall. Oh, jeez. That is spiteful. Guess I don't. Oh, why did I do that? That should not have entered the battlefield untapped. I don't really have an option besides just jamming on my opponent here. I have to get under this verdict. Though leaving up this mana is actually pretty sweet. My opponent should not. So, leaving up that mana kind of implies that I have an Atarkus command, which would have meant my opponent was supposed to block the Bushwhacker. So my opponent has Spell Snare. Ugh, we're getting dismantled. We're just going to get, like, Ojutai's commanded too. Okay, so I'm willing to believe that blue-white life gain and 2-drops and removal is a very bad matchup. Not deploying the Burning Tree Emissary because I think that my odds of winning are higher if I save that for a Bushwhacker turn, though I guess... Nah, I should have played it because of Spell Snare. Like, my line was to try and force a verdict, and then... Oh boy, this is bad. Yeah, saving the thing that's just going to trade with Snare is not right. Fine trading there. Yeah, the Emissary is just going to trade with Spell Snare at some later point anyways. I guess now that my opponent knows about it, playing the Heath and then finding a Stomping Ground was correct. Yeah. I kind of like the idea of saving the Bushwhacker for a later point. My opponent leaving up all this mana does not bode well, though. Ugh, this Lone Missionary, it's just not the card I want to play against. I guess Timely Reinforcements would be just as bad. think in this specific spot, yeah. So that was what I was hoping for. And then I can attempt to get the pig in for an attack. Okay, well that failed horribly. Let's see if we can try again in a couple turns. Our opponent's down to 2 cards in hand, which is decent for us. Okay. That card would have been really good at a few points. Would be at 7. They still would probably have killed us, even if we had countered a lone missionary trigger with it. I think the point that a Tarkus command might have, no, because we still would have gotten Snapcaster Path and Verdicted. I guess the emissary thing is kind of funny because the Verdict traded with the Nicodle and would have killed the emissary as well. And then it turns out that the emissary just traded for that spell snare anyways later. So like the fact that the Verdict still just got spent on a single creature is kind of makes that a wash. So I think this is a fine spot to go for a Reckless Bushwhacker. More likely what's going to happen is my opponent's going to cast Oditize Command. Return target creature and counter target creature. So I think that I just have to let this happen. And then my plan has to be to stabilize with blockers next turn. Maybe I was supposed to Surge the Bushwhacker and block with it. That might have been my way to win this game. And then my opponent also has to draw like 7 lands in a row. But technically an out. The old defensive Surge Bushwhacker. Yeah, I think I should have done that last turn. Yeah, that's enough. That's not a good matchup.